Welcome in to Sports 5 Talk, everybody. Simone, Eli, Gerhard, Mathangani joining you this Wednesday night. Super excited to be talking about another week of the high school football season. And, of course, college football well underway as opening week is under our belts. And we are gearing up for week 2. Of course, all the expectations that come with week 2 of the college football season. Gerhard, it's been a fun ride, but I feel like we're just constantly playing catch up right now.
Hey, that's how this time of year really is in our business. But also, I think for teams in general, you feel like you've learned a lot about yourself in the off season, and then you get on the field and you learn.
I learned a lot about myself in the off season.
I think we all do at this point.
Yeah.
But no, it was great to see college football back in earnest. I know we had a few games last week, but to see everybody back on the field this past week was incredible. I'm sure we'll get that same kind of juice when the NFL gets rolling this Sunday. But another huge week in high school football, kind of illustrating more of what we've seen over the last, I would say, about 2 to 3 weeks, and kind of highlighting some of the teams that we expect to make a deep run this year.
Yeah, and just want to quickly say thank you to everybody who has tuned in to Fifth Quarter Extra on Friday nights, stuck in there late for us to recap each week. And then here on Wednesdays, this is our second official show, but it's really been enjoyable already just to be able to give you a behind-the-scenes look at WKRG News 5 Sports and everything that we're kind of doing back here. I guess our entire team, there's over 20 people that work on those Friday night shows. It's not just G and I. We're the ones that out there doing the thing on the TV, but there's several people behind the scenes. And so we appreciate you guys tuning in and be a part of the conversation, please. If you're on Facebook, please comment. Tell us what's going on in your life. Tell us what your thoughts are each game, each week, and we want to hear from you as well.
We want to hear your opinions too.
Yep.
If you have an opinion about what you've seen so far on the college scene, on the high school scene, if you have a pick, whether it's against the spread or just straight up, or you have a
or you don't understand sports betting like myself,
or you have something very opinionated.
No judgment zone.
Oh, we definitely want to hear it.
Yeah,
right here.
Absolutely. We're going to kick things off as we have previously, talking a little high school football, guys. Week 3 of the season already, and everybody will be in region play, so that certainly makes the stakes higher. So everybody's a little bit tighter. A lot of teams going into their third game, some teams going into just game 2. But needless to say, everybody has played typically at this point. And so everyone looking to make changes, improvements. You start to see a lot of growth early in the year when you have a couple games under your belt and you're going into this week. And there's no better time than when you're entering region play, especially as talented as several of the teams in our area are.
I think it's data points. You just get these data points throughout the course of the season, but these early data points, and you hear coaches say all the time, and I agree with this notion that you don't want to make anything too much or too little, but you do want to be able to understand the importance and significance of all of these games. And I think that's what we got last week. We got a lot of games, a few region games, as you mentioned. This week, a whole lot more region games that will really illustrate what the playoff picture will look like. And so I think that at this point of the season, for most teams, you kind of have what you think your identity is with still opportunities to layer onto that depending on what happens throughout your season. Because, of course, injuries happen. Of course, changes of plans happen. And there might be some things that you did not think you do well and you do very well, or vice versa. Things that you did not do well or things that you are doing well that you didn't think that you were. So going into every week, I think it's a little bit more important, but especially this week, going into region play for every team, I think it's monumental for most teams here. Yeah,
we will have live coverage from several games throughout the Mobile and Baldwin area and all along the Gulf Coast. Gerhard will be at MGM as they begin Class 7A action. They will host Daphne in a game that really could determine the winner of that region. We'll talk more about that first. But a top 10 matchup at the beach is really taking center stage. We will have live coverage from there as well on Friday, leading up to 10th ranked Gulf Shores playing host to the number 1 team in the state in 6A. That's Saraland. And Gerhard, I'm not sure where we thought these two teams would be 3 weeks into the season, but here we are rolling into arguably the biggest game of the year.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought that this game might be two teams that are ranked. I don't think that they saw 2-0 versus 0-2 going into this, but give a lot of credit to Coach Hud, and they made Coach Hudson making a really, really tough scheduling choice at the very beginning of the season, going against Choctawhatchee in week 1, MGM in week 2, really trying to set his team up for the gauntlet that is Class 6A Region 1. I think a lot of people understood that Saraland, with quarterback KJ Lacey back in the fold this year, that they would have a strong run offensively to their football team, and so far so good. They scored 59 plus or 50 plus last week. So I think a lot of people thought that, okay, these two teams will be good. I don't know if we thought 0-2 versus 2-0, but I think once you get into region play, I think the the mindset changes a little bit more. And I think that people –
it definitely does.
You just can't look at records going into these games because of the two teams they had to play just to get here.
Yeah, and if you look at this Gulf Shores team right now, I mean, they lost to MGM, who is one of the best teams in the area, obviously a bigger school, so you would just have to assume more depth, of course. And nobody really thought Gulf Shores would maybe be 0-2 coming off of a perfect season and winning the 5A state title. But all that to say, they also lost their quarterback, who was injured in the MGM game. Colin Wilson balled out. But at the end of the day, when you're facing a team in Class 7A with a lot of depth on both sides of the ball, and you're trying to run a guy, and he is as talented as anybody that we have here.
For sure.
That limits you in what you're able to do. Obviously, he only has so many legs under him. And so what Gulf Shores is able to do this week, I think, in terms of moving the ball against a very talented Saraland team, especially the guys up front. As we know, Antonio Coleman, 4 or 5-star, Auburn commit. I think a lot of that will do with the success of the offense, of course, led by who's going to be their quarterback. Will they have their QB1 back from injury? And from everything that I have heard, it's kind of a day-to-day type process right now.
Right, and I think adjustments are the key thing here. You might remember last year, Davidson ran into a similar situation. They have an all-star running back and
they just changed everything.
Butler, and they changed their entire offense. They made those adjustments on the fly. So I'm really interested to see how Gulf Shores does this because, like you said, we don't know the status of their starting quarterback, and I think that's kind of a day-to-day thing, and we'll find out on Friday if he is good to go. But they made those adjustments last week against MGM. Obviously, putting Colin Wilson at quarterback. He was legitimately running quarterback. I think we said Wildcat, but I think it was legitimately a running quarterback.
Did they throw the ball too? I think he might have thrown it once.
We'll pull it up just to see. But I think they trust him. They trust him in this offense. But I also do think if they do need to go onto a second leg, they have that option.
Yeah, this is the game last week. Obviously against MGM, and this was a back and forth affair, and not a ton of scoring. Maybe that you would have expected, at least early in this game. Obviously, MGM has several weapons back. Shondell Harris, I've really been impressed with his ability to just completely turn into this dual threat quarterback to an extent. But here's Colin Wilson, the guy we're talking about. Man, he is a specimen, no doubt. He's talented as all get out. It's just how far can you go when you are limited to having one guy kind of be that one-trick pony, so to speak. It's not ideal for Gulf Shores. It's not what they want to do. It's not what they're going to do. They'll bring in a different guy. They'll find something else to do. They know that in Class 6A, Region 1, the SEC of high school football, you got to have another wrinkle. That's just where they are right now.
And I think that they will have to be able to maybe take a guy from defense or maybe take a guy that hasn't played a whole lot of offense and incorporate him into the fabric of the offensive game plan. Because, like you said, I think that this region is way too tough for you to go and stick with one person. And I think Coach Hudspeth obviously knows this, and the coaching staff knows this, that they will have to throw some wrinkles in, not only Saraland, but moving forward, other places they can go with the football, other ways to move the football outside of Colin Wilson, and even maybe get a little creative in the way that they get Colin Wilson the football, whether it's out of the backfield or as a true wide receiver, getting the ball in other ways. That way the defense just can't key in on one thing.
Yeah, and one thing about Saraland, they haven't lost many games in the last few years. 28-2 coming into this season. Of course, they're 2-0 with big wins against Jackson, dominated the number 1 team in Class 4A, and then they of course go on and beat Blunt last week in a game that was out of hand pretty quickly. This is a team. The only way you're going to beat Saraland if you outscore them. Okay, don't come at me. I know that's obvious. It's going to be a high scoring affair. Okay, because to slow down this team, you probably need to bring in like the Alabama Crimson Tide. And at the end of the day, you're dealing with future Division 1 standouts. Guys who, the Texas commit and KJ Lacey. You got Dylan Alfred, the Ole Miss guy. And then that's just the two guys that get a lot of the headlines. But it's going to be a high-scoring affair. And it's like, okay, who's going to be on top when the clock hits 000? Because that's the type of game that if you want to beat Saraland, then you got to kind of just commit to that's what it's going to be.
I don't know what the number is, but I think there's a number out there. The number that you have to at least get to
it's like 107.
as the barrier of entry to beat this team. And maybe that number is 35. Maybe that number is in the 40s where, hey, you probably have to score 40s, at least this many points to give yourselves a chance just because of how lethal that offense is. And you mentioned it. It is not just one side of the foot. It's not just one aspect of throwing the football with KJ Lacey. They can run it with Sante McWilliams.
Incredible.
That offensive line is absolutely incredible as well. They can cut you deep with C.D. Gill and some of these other guys that run these more shallow routes.
Yep.
Or they can beat you over the top with both C.D. Gill and Dylan Offord, as you mentioned as well. And then their defense is great too. We saw their defense.
That's the thing.
Put up
They're
some
going to get you on
touchdowns
both sides.
as well.
Yeah, no question. Yep.
And when your defense is score and they have special weapons on the special teams
Yep.
as well, they can just beat you in a variety of ways. So I think every team has to know that you're going to have to light up the scoreboard in order to knock off these Spartans.
Yeah, needless to say, Saraland has rolled on despite their best player last year being the freshman of the week in the SEC and Ryan Williams. Can't wait to talk about him on this show, and we will in just a bit. If you're just joining us, it is Sports 5 Talk. Gerhard Mathangani, Simone Eli, the News 5 sports team joining you every week on Wednesday nights to talk high school, college football, the NFL, and really just what's going on in the world as we move forward here in the sports world. But piggybacking off of that game, we did talk to Coach Hudspeth this week. Shout out to Debbie Williams and Lee Atherton, who are holding it down there at the beach for us. They spoke with Coach Hud. Here's what he had to say about that very talented Saraland offense that they have going on right now.
You know, we had a young offensive line, and they really played well. And when a guy rushes for 400 yards, you got to give a little credit to the O-line too. And so they're getting much better. And our team, I think, after that game, going on the road to MGM, a team that went to the semis last year, and to play the way we did, I think that gave them a little bit of, you know what, I think we got a chance. And if we can keep improving, long season left and a lot of football left, hopefully we can finish strong and see what we can do in this region.
So that was a slightly different soundbite than the one that I thought we were going to run. Obviously, that was Coach Hud talking about Gulf Shores Dolphins. Eventually, we got him popped up there, looking sharp, getting ready for practice day in and day out there at the beach. He also alluded to KJ Lacey being an unbelievably talented, high-powered offense that Saraland brings. But I think that he knows that nothing is lost in being 0-2 at this point, and there's all that's left is opportunity when you're kind of going in as, I mean. There's a lot of unknown, unknown going into a new region and into a new class.
And I think we mentioned this with a lot of coaches about how, scheduling a tough week 1 and week 2, you give yourself the possibility. I mean, we pat you on the back, but you give yourself the possibility to not start off very well. Yeah. And I think both these teams, hard schedule to start out with, MGM and Gulf Shores I'm talking about.
Yep.
And Gulf Shores just happened to come out on the losing side of both those games, but I do think they're battle-tested going into this very tough region. He talks about that.
That was a tight game. It's not like they got blown out and they didn't have their starting quarterback. They certainly didn't get blown out.
Yeah. It was obviously a really tough game, and
what was the final of that one?
Pull that one up. That final 20. Yeah, a 4-point game.
Yeah. Which honestly I think came down to the wire, maybe a turnover in the fourth quarter that went MGM's way, and then they go with the go-ahead touchdown late. And obviously we peel back the curtain every single week when it comes to fifth quarter. We have a staff. We have a fantastic staff. Nonetheless, it's a limited staff. We don't have people that are at games for 4 quarters, and so we have highlights from much of the first half. Arnell went out there and did a fantastic job with those highlights, but we don't know exactly how things always play out,
especially at the end.
Yeah, no doubt. But nonetheless, it's not like they weren't competitive against a team that went to the semifinals in 7A a year ago. Yeah,
and he alluded to that, just how tough this MGM team is, and a team that he said went all the way to the semifinals in Class 7A last year, a team that returns a lot of talent. I think these teams kind of mirror each other in a little bit in the sense that Colin Wilson, running back, had to play quarterback. Same thing with Shondell Harris. He's a running back / athlete last year for the Vikings. Ended up playing quarterback as well. I know it's more determined for him playing MGM as quarterback. So we'll see how this team does as they move forward in that very tough Class 6A Region 1.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate the comments coming in right now. We will get to several of those. Gerhard Mathangani is the man with the plan. There's no doubt about that. Yes, could not agree more. Jason Boatman, we appreciate you tuning in for sure. Bryant as well. Guys, thank you so much for joining us again here on Sports 5 Talk. Let's move forward here with the season. Our game of the week for week 3 will be out in Sims as MGM welcomes in Daphne. And I think that part of the reason why I felt like this was such a huge game in week 3 is because these could be the top two home playoff teams in this region 10 weeks from now.
And I think these two teams have really kind of a lot of similarities going into it.
Yeah.
There were some question marks coming from last year, and there were some things that you knew that they both did well. Daphne, you have to start with that defense and just how strong this defense is. They returned 9 guys back from it. Coach Kenny King is a defensive guy. He preached 2 things the entire time during spring football and everything else. He preached physicality, being able to get to the football, and playing sound in all 3 phases. Well, they played Pace High School earlier this season, and they got 2 huge special teams plays that really set up their offenses very, very short short fields in order to score.
Yep.
And I think that they were honestly relying on that complementary football, their offense and their defense really helping out, and they're feeding their special teams as well. Same thing on the other end with MGM. We knew that they had a very talented offensive line back this year. John Stevens is one of those guys. They're kind of the captain of that offensive line. Then you had some athletes that are returning as well, and Shondell Harris and a few of these others. And so some question marks as well. How much could they handle last year's success?
Yep.
With Daphne, how they handled last year's, in their eyes, I'm not calling it a failure, but they saw last year's a bit of a down season for them. So now going into it,
if you don't make the playoffs at Daphne, it's down season.
Exactly.
Kenny King doesn't need me to tell him that. He already knows that. And I mean, there is a level of pressure in high school football that exists whether we like it or not. It's just what happens. Kenny King has done a really, really nice job managing the ebbs and flows that naturally comes with coaching 17 to 18-year-old young men who are, 14 to 18-year-old young men, I really should say, not just 17 to 18, but, who deal with the things of life. And then maybe this is the coach wife in me talking a little bit.
But it's a great perspective.
But there's a difference between a team, that doesn't ever really get there, and you win a few games and you feel good about where you're at versus a program that is a powerhouse program that they have a fan base that they want to see go and be successful. And I think that Kenny King feels like he has that team right now. And so they have all the pieces on defense. They have, probably the most veteran unit returning in that regard. Zach Golson has done a fantastic job at MGM. And if you look at what he's doing with the feeder programs, that's where it really begins when you're trying to build a legitimate powerhouse, a successful program at any classification, but definitely in Class 7A, when you're managing so many people that are in your area who could go get picked off by, I'm not going to name teams, but just teams in the area. You see kids leave all the time because they're third on the depth chart as a sophomore. Well, that's like the reality of what it typically should be for a Class 7A team, regardless. So I think that both of these men and their staffs have done a terrific job in getting their programs to where they are at this moment. Zach Golson did it. It was like a 3-year plan. And you know what? That's rare.
Right.
It doesn't happen often.
Yep.
Kenny King has dealt with the ebbs and flows. He feels like he has the team. We're going to find out on Friday.
Yeah, and I think that one of the great matchups to me from a coaching perspective, this is more like a chess game inside of the real game. It's Kenny King and that defense, drawing up that defense and against MGM and Golson and his offense, because they're both very, very creative minds as it relates to being able to show them a little bit something different offensively and defensively. So that chess match in the game between these two guys.
What coaches love. It makes them great.
And I think that going into it from the planning perspective is one thing, and then the old Mike Tyson quote that everybody's got a plan until you get hit in the face. So then after some adversity hits, how will both teams react? And that's kind of to me the game within the game with which I want to see how it plays out Friday night. Yeah,
no doubt. So like we mentioned off the top, everybody will be in region play. So we are going to have, and it's crazy because with the reclass every single year is the redraw as well. So if you don't know, every single year, all of the head coaches meet in the offseason and they pick where they're going to have a bye, where they're going to, like who's going to play who, this entire deal. It's very complicated. I don't even like hearing about it in the aftermath. It's always a thing. But this is pretty much how it happens. It's not like they decide, hey, we're going to throw the best 2 7A teams together in week 3 and roll the dice on how the rest of it goes. Good luck to you. Like, that's just the luck of the draw, you know? And so it's going to be fun to see how it plays out. And I think that having these early matchups certainly gives you a measuring stick for what it's going to like moving forward. But as we move forward in this show in Class 7A, I want to talk about a few other games. One of them, of course, will involve Spanish Fort. Right now, the Toros just right there outside of the 6A rankings. I believe they're getting votes, and they welcome in Baldwin County this week. Did I have that right?
That's right.
Yep. I'm just trying to keep track of all the 50 games that we cover. And listen, man, Spanish Fort pulled one out against Theodore because I think Theodore was questioning a little bit how good can we be after kind of getting punched in the mouth against Baker in week 1. And then they go into double overtime in this game. And from talking to head coach Steve Mask over the weekend, he felt like they should have gone for 2. in regulation and really taking the win in this game. So I feel like they're a confident bunch, Theodore is, but when we're talking about Spanish Fort, I mean, this is a very, very talented program, and Chase Smith has a lot of expectations for these guys.
And I think that we got a little taste of that when we went to go crown our Zaxby's Player of the Week after week 1 in Schamberger. We were out on their campus, and Spanish Fort
and
just had a
came.
huge it did come very, very, very quickly. We brought the lightning with us, and Coach wasn't happy with us.
We did.
42-6 they won in game 1, and Theodore, as you mentioned, Baker put it on them a little bit. So I think people going into it, maybe ill-informed people said, okay, hey, this Spanish Fort team was rolling. They could win this game big. I think you have to give a hat tip to Theodore in the way that they were able to play in that football game. But I think these are both teams, both Spanish Fort and Baldwin County. Last week we talked about the razor-thin margins in this region. They both won by the exact same. They both played the exact same scored game. The game at the end of the game was the exact same. Baldwin County lost 24-21, and Spanish Fort won 24-21. So this is another one I'm really interested to see, how this one plays out after Baldwin County played really two tough opponents and played, St. Paul's to the very end as well. So
very competitively.
Exactly. So they just played a 4-quarter game. Both of them did. So I want to see how they respond going into week 3.
And when you have guys like Ty Mims, the younger of the 3 or 4 of them that exist that are all super fast, like Baldwin County does, that playmaking ability in any given moment, they call it sudden change, right? So, I mean, he goes, returns a punt. I mean, that could be a one-score shift. I mean, whatever that looks like for Baldwin County, I mean, Coach is well aware that they have those type of guys, and Baldwin County really does year in and year out. They always have athletes. So you have the right staff in there. You have the right people in there to get them to a point where they're executing to the same level of what their talent is.
Right.
Watch out. I mean, this could be a team that we're talking about 10 weeks from now.
Yeah, and I know they're 0-2, but you have to give a huge hat tip to Coach Davis of there at Baldwin County, doing a really good job of keeping his team mentally in this, and we'll see how they come out this week at the Hill, but that's a very, very tough place to play. As Spanish Fort, host that football game, and Coach Chase Smith is telling his guys, hey, just because we're undefeated, we can't rest on our laurels here. This is a really good football team, and all you have to do is turn on the film. And just like you said, that number one, the fastest guy probably in the county, one of the fastest guys in the county.
Dude is a freak, yep.
Yeah, he's unbelievably quick that could change the momentum of the football game. So the way this one plays out early, I think is really interesting, but I won't be a bit surprised if this is another one of those games that goes 4 quarters.
Yeah, bumping up back to Class 7A, talking about Fairhope, the Pirates bounced back in a big way in week 2. They lost that week 1 game against a very talented Spanish Fort team at home. Then they went on the road to beat Faith Academy, who right now is trying to restructure their roster a little bit. A few guys left the program late in the year. Eric Speakman took over as coach, and it's already tough enough to go through an off season that is a limited off season. You don't have the weight room maybe where you want it. I mean, it's not like the program wasn't left in a good place. I mean, I don't mean that whatsoever. Right. I mean, what Faith Academy and what Coach French built that program into is impressive in and of itself. But regardless, when you come in and you're trying to introduce your own thing, it takes some time. Well, when guys leave after spring, it takes more time. So don't give up on where Faith is at. But if you're Fairhope, you got to be excited. Now you travel to an 0-2 Alma Bryant team, and you have confidence or 0-1 Alma Bryant team, I should say, when a team that is looking for an early win. With that maybe comes a little bit of like, okay, let's not overlook anybody. This is they've struggled lately, but an opportunity for both teams nonetheless. Yeah,
and I think that when Fairhope came out and they scored, I think it was 36-0 in that Faith Academy game. You saw some things offensively that I think that they've been looking for basically the last 2 years. I know Coach Carter has done a great job with his football program, but being able to string together some offense that they can rely on. But they'll really need it because the Hurricanes have a really, really good defense, and I think that we saw that last week, and they should feel good about what they are able to do defensively going into this matchup. And I know they have a lot of young pieces on the offensive side, so if the defense can kind of carry them and give them hope and move that game forward, I think it'll be a really interesting back and forth between the Fairhope offense, the Bryant defense to see how that one plays out.
Yeah, and Alma Bryant obviously dealing with a freshman at quarterback. When you have a freshman and a quarterback in Class 7A, really in any class, but most especially when you're playing against some of the biggest teams in the state. Rest of the games in 7A, I know that Davidson is going to be at home as well. G, you want to go over the rest of the 7A Region 1 games that we'll have this week?
Yeah, Davidson at the aforementioned, or Davidson hosting Baker. Davidson, of course, off last week. They're 1-0 to start the season off. And then, as we mentioned, Foley and Robertsdale, 2 teams, as we talked about going into the season, that I think that Robertsdale everything was fresh, and Foley wanted to revive after last season. So I think that this game was really interesting as well. So those are your 4 games in Class 7A, Region 1. Davidson hosting Baker, MGM hosting Daphne, Foley at Robertsdale, Fairhope at Bryant.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we give Baker the love that they certainly deserve. And I mean, Coach Lambert over at Davidson as well. I mean, they pulled one out against Murphy at home in week 1. Then they had some time to watch the Bryant versus Baker film. And what they saw, I'm sure, is that Juan Johnson over at Baker is moving the ball very quickly in a style of football that we don't often see along the Gulf Coast. And both of us having covered football, at a high level in the Birmingham area, we know that Husky fast was a legitimate thing, and they moved the ball very, very quickly. Now, like we mentioned, Alma Bryant did a fairly decent job at getting to the quarterback, like you'll see the play here early on. But eventually, when you are on the field as much as the Bryant defense was, and you're dealing with a team that gets on the ball faster than probably anybody down here, that's going to take some adjusting.
Yeah, and it's hard to replicate in practice. And as you get into the game and the defense wears down a little bit, that's when the offense starts to take a little bit of advantage. And that's what you saw as the game really played out in the latter stages. But, I mean, you mentioned it with Coach Juan Johnson and what he's been able to do with his offense. I don't know what their number is. I think maybe the 15-second point of the game, or the shot clock, so to speak, the high school version of the shot clock, is where they want to snap the football. But they get that ball out quickly. They remind me a lot more of a basketball team that likes to run up tempo the way they like to run their offense, and give a lot of credit to them because they picked it up very, very quickly. And as you said, we don't see that a lot down here. So I like to see how all these teams prepare for something completely different from what you see week to week down here along the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, and I can tell you that they're not going as fast as he ultimately wants them to.
Yeah.
So he's always going to be expecting more for sure. There's no doubt about that. All right. Anyone else in 6A that we need to mention? I know that we went through most of the gauntlet there, but let's recap who will be in 6A. Of course, Saraland will be at Gulf Shores, and probably the biggest game in that matchup. We talked about Baldwin County at Spanish Fort. Theodore this week.
That's right, at McGill-Tulane.
Okay, at the Lip, yep.
And that's that game. McGill coming off that huge win, painted the Cameron in orange for a 10th time. So they have some momentum going into this one.
10th time in a row.
In a row, yeah. 10th time straight up. And then 2 teams that are looking for their first win. So we'll have either Murphy or Blunt winning their first game of the season, both 0-2 going into this. And because it's a 7-team region, you mentioned it on the top end of just how the way that these teams
nine-team
region. St. Paul's is the team that is off this week.
Yeah. So when you're in those 9-team regions, it's another reason why this is so challenging. Especially you look at the lineup of teams, but when you're in a 9-team region, you're not getting a lot of time off in games that really, really matter, where you have to be dialed in and really focused on what it is that's happening for game planning and, of course, execution as well. All right, we were out at UMS this week, yesterday. For our player of the week, Bo Wills, the Bulldogs running back, but really the Bulldogs kind of do it all, man. He was a big part of the UMS big win over LaFleur as they bounced back after falling in the Battle of Old Shell Road.
Reminds me of a bit of like a utility player in baseball, a guy that can play a little bit of everything, and that's what Bo Wills was, offensively and defensively.
I'm going to show this double pass play, so bear with us for a moment. I'm going to get that pulled up. But
that double pass was absolutely incredible.
Yes.
But this was a UMS team we knew going into it. They wanted to get some momentum. Obviously, a really tough game 1. That game 1 loss to their rivals from St. Paul's to start the season. They wanted to get off to a really nice footing in Region 1 play as they hosted
when it matters most, And if you take a look here, I mean, this is the first drive, and Terry Curtis, of course, and Bo Wills both told us that they didn't plan on pulling this one out this early, but of course execution was spot on, and this was a close battle for a while there, but UMS ends up beating LaFleur. Of course, that's 5A Region 1 action, Class 5A, and so a good start for UMS. Now they head to BC Rain against a Red Raiders team that is, after you win the way that you've won a year ago, and what Coach Yelling has built over his 4 or 5 years there, I mean, the expectations are high, and they put that on themselves. Yeah,
more than 15 seniors graduated from last year's team. The question going into this season, who are going to be those guys that step up? And you got a guy like Ricky Nichols on defense that's done a really good job. And I know they're trying to put together some pieces on offense, but this is another team where it's like, don't let their record deceive you. They played 2 really tough opponents, their last one being against Foley. And so I think this is a BC Rain team kind of like UMS Wright last week, really looking to take that next step going into this week. And I think they see this game as basically a litmus test for them, a game that I know that they think they can win. UMS Wright understanding, hey, we have some momentum, but we have no time to sit there and cheer for ourselves and pat ourselves on the back because we have another really talented team BC Reign at their place, and a place that Coach Terry Curtis knows really well as well.
No doubt.
So it's an interesting dynamic there.
He has a ton of respect for Coach Yelding. It was really neat to hear from him in that perspective. Coach Yelding, they call him Poochie. A lot of people just have a ton of love for that guy, and he's really done things the right way. And so he's well liked for good reason. But the 5A Region 1, I didn't know what to expect after Gulf Shores got bumped up into 6A. Who's going to be the guy? I think that Viger has proven that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. They're 2-0 on the year after winning the Battle of Pritchard and then beating Tuscaloosa County, a 7A school, of course, out of the Tuscaloosa area, Northport, last week. But Citronelle also has been sneaky good, and Coach Rowell, I think, has been excited about what they have going on there, too.
Yeah, both those teams 2-0 going into this week's games. Viger and Citronelle both on the road this week. We talked about Faith Academy. That's where Citronelle will be headed to. And then Viger going to LaFleur. So another nice battle in there inside the city of Mobile. Viger, for those of you who haven't seen the latest polls, Viger's actually up to number 7 this week. So getting more and more respect from the pollsters, of which I know we joked last week we should be one. We still should be one. Yeah. But I think the pollsters are getting it right. They understand, with Coach McKenzie, with what they've seen so far with quarterbacks.
Everyone knew when he came in that it could be very, very high-powered offense. And I think that Coach McKenzie's coming in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, or a big chip on his shoulder, and he wants to show folks, like, we're going to score points, and we're going to score a lot of them, and we're not going to take our foot off the gas. He didn't do it in the state title game a couple years ago. Throwing BBs there up. How was the score? You were calling the call for that game.
Yeah, that was, I think, 46-49 to they beat Aniana, which is one of the storied programs in the entire country, in the entire state of Alabama. And so I have to go get the right score, but it's like 46 to like 19 or something like that.
He beat them.
Beat them pretty good.
Deep balls in the fourth quarter. Love it. And then one team who's also putting up a huge number each week, speaking of Viger and changes and things of that nature, is that former Viger coach Marcus Cook, now the offensive coordinator at Williamson, who has put up like 100 points plus in the first 2 weeks of the season. They played week 1
against Booker T. Washington out of Pensacola.
Yeah, out of Florida. And then they went to Mississippi and had a huge win in week 2 last week. And so now they return. Are they on the road or are they
they're on the road at Alberta this week.
Okay, so Alberta looking to bounce back again after that Thursday night loss against Robertsdale, a team that is obviously a lot of momentum going in 7A, Class 7A Region 1 right now. Alberta looking to bounce back. And they had the extra day of preparation a little bit. Probably went and watched Williamson. I know Coach McDaniel always does a great job getting his guys prepared there. So, but on the other side of it, Antonio Coleman's got to be excited about what this offense looks like. Yeah,
and there's 3 teams that are 2-0 all on the road. So this week will be really interesting as they all step into the region play. And this is another, I think, interesting scheduling standpoint for all 3 of these teams because, like you said, you have some momentum going. And I think in every case it's a little bit different. Williamson, a lot of new pieces. That defense is coming together really, really well. Viger, we knew there was a lot of new pieces. We didn't know how it would come together, but it's come together really quickly. And then Citronelle, obviously that momentum from last year going into this week. So I'm really excited about all 3 of those teams. And then the home teams. Can they defend their home turf? The home teams be Faith Academy, LaFleur, and Alberta. So there's really interesting dynamics here.
A lot of great storylines for sure. Appreciate Keith Turner, Sr., tuning in. Always a huge fan of the show and News 5 Sports. Thank you so much. And you're totally right. Coach McKenzie is back. And he is changing the game at Viger. No disrespect to what Marcus Cook did there for the last 2 years, and then previously as the offensive coordinator under McKenzie while he was there as well. So that will be a fun one to watch, and it'll definitely be fun when we see those 2 match up later in the year in Region 1 play.
I'll get the exact date on that, but that one should be really interesting. And
I wish that was like right now.
We'll see a lot more of that playoff picture, and then to find out
storylines
those teams would be if both teams are undefeated going into it, it'll be even more interesting. So both of Viger and Citronelle games.
I'll be interested to see what the path is to that game because, as you know, I mean, like there's several teams that will be vying for the top 4 spots, and it's kind of just like crapshoot. I mean, last year I remember this one came down to the wire. I think there was a tiebreaker or something involved. We were back here trying to do type of math and the ninja stuff that doesn't make any sense. The HSA pulls out for tiebreakers and whatever, and I could not figure out who's actually in the playoffs and who wasn't. That's just the truth. So.
Yeah, and it's really hard to figure out. But to your point, that Citronelle game, the Viger-Citronelle game will be in a couple of weeks. They'll play at Citronelle on September the 20th.
Viger-Williamson.
And then the Viger-Williamson game, it will be the 18th of October.
We'll never know. So. Never know what the storylines will look like when we get to that point for sure. Yeah. All right, guys, we are going to transition to college football. Before we do, let's quickly talk about St. Michael getting a big win in the Battle of the Catholics. Or can we say that?
It's another one. They said it was right against McGill last year, and then now McGill's now kind of turned into John Carroll, and John Carroll obviously came down here and that big monster game there for.
And John Carroll has been no chump. They used to be horrible when I was in the Birmingham area.
Yeah, same.
And
second best team at home.
I mean, they were not good for a second, and I don't know who the head coach is there anymore. Maybe I should, but they were really good a year ago. And then give credit to St. Michael and Phillip Rivers doing a great job. They are able to kind of battle it out in this game and then come up with a 20-19 win.
Yeah, I think that when you look at what St. Michael has been able to do, going back to last year and punching their first ticket to the playoffs, I think they've just been building on momentum. Yeah. Brody Jones is a guy you'll hear about the entire season. This is one of Gunnar Rivers.
Let's run that back.
This is one of Governor Rivers' favorite targets. He's already had a monster season so far.
I mean, this is a beautifully thrown ball because only one guy was going to catch that, but the fact that he caught it, also equally impressive. Great throw, great catch. One of those things that you don't see very often play out as that beautifully in high school football. But Gunnar Rivers is the truth, y'all. Don't make no mistake about that. That dude's going to be good.
He seriously is. And for going back to Brody Jones, the guy that's already so far caught a bunch of passes. He's caught 16 passes, 239 yards, a pair of touchdowns so far.
He's a junior?
He is. Let me see. He is a junior. That's right. Class of 2026.
Dude, if I'm Brody Jones, I'm like in there rolling with the Rivers, man.
Oh, yeah.
Rolling with the Rivers, guys. Throw me that ball.
That could be like a Phillip Rivers' favorite target in the NFL was maybe Antonio Gates was his number one guy. Yeah. That could be like a Gunnar Rivers and Brody Jones kind of a nice little 1-2 punch there.
Yeah, appreciate Quentin Russell tuning in. I don't disagree that I think Baker will be very, very strong into that game against Davidson this week, and then also saying that Phillip Rivers, Coach of the Year. I mean, listen, man, if you can get that thing rolling as fast as he possibly can, it could be very, very impressive to see how this one. Now listen, make no mistake, you got a team just north of Mobile County that is not just going to
let them have it.
Yeah. Jackson's going to be rolling as well. Brody Jones, no doubt. Unbelievably impressive. Gerhard, any other high school games we want to chat about quickly before we transition?
Yeah, we'll stay in Class 4A Region 1. Orange Beach it's faced Bayside Academy. That's actually a non-region game. Remember, Bayside dropped down to Class 3A in that matchup. And then as well as Flemington Excel. And I think another big game is Cottage Hill Christian hosting Hillcrest Evergreen. Hillcrest 2-0 on the season. And another huge game that I saw earlier, Milry 1-1 on the season against Sweetwater. That should be a really interesting game there in Class 1A as well. Also, a key note here, we had 3 teams that are number 1 in their respective rankings. You mentioned Saraland earlier. Jackson is obviously number 1 in Class 4A, and T.R. Miller slides up to the number 1 spot in Class 3A.
I didn't even see. I saw the rankings earlier. I didn't notice that. Yeah,
because Fife lost to Pisgah. Shout out to Pisgah. They've been arch rivals for a really long time.
I do picks for AL.com, not here on WKRG. That's not the platform to do picks. But I totally, I listen. It is great to see that there is seemingly more parity in high school athletics. I mean, you're going to have the powerhouse teams, but similar to college football, it's becoming a little bit more even across the board.
Yeah, and you don't see a whole lot of losses from that program, but you mentioned you're starting to see it a lot. And if you go into that game picking Fife, I don't think anybody would blame you. I mean,
if you don't pick Fife, people are wondering what you're doing. So
exactly. So now that there is a kind of a power change there in Class 3A. So shout out to T.R. Miller, the new number 1 team in that class.
Good stuff there, no doubt. All right, guys, we're going to transition, talk a little college football now. If you are just tuning in, this is Sports 5 Talk. Gerhard and Simone joining you every Wednesday to talk high school football, college, NFL, and really anything that's going on. We've talked volleyball, we've talked other local sports, and so we'll give you a little bit of everything here on this show. And sometimes we spend a little bit more time on high school than maybe what we should, but to be honest, it's our passion. It's what we do. It's what we truly do love it. So this week, let's talk South Alabama first quickly, Gerhard. The Jags will look to bounce back as they travel all the way to Athens, Ohio. Give the MAC some love. I played in the MAC. I hated going to Ohio, by the way. It had a haunted campus, and we snuck out one night from where we were staying on campus at Ohio. This is a story you didn't ask for.
I want it though.
I know exactly that's what I'm saying. And we were like, okay, doing all this Googling, and it was like, okay, the campus at Ohio is haunted. We're like, is it really haunted? We left the night before the game and walked throughout their entire campus because we were staying at a hotel that was across the street. It was like the campus hotel, Hotel Capstone that they have in Tuscaloosa. And we were it was 2 a.m.
Were you guys ghost hunting?
Honestly, yes. It was the most ridiculous thing ever. I mean, we were grown. It's not like I was 16.
This is a college basketball team.
College senior.
A college D1 basketball
There's 22-year-olds out here looking for ghosts the night before.
So the key question is, did anybody find any?
Dude, no. But it was still creepy.
I bet.
Yeah, and we have pictures. We have pictures to show. Anyways, that's where South's going. I don't know how we got on that topic, but that's where South is going. So South will look to bounce back, but listen, no one wants to see the new regime, the new era of a coach taking over somewhere with a loss, and that's what we saw in Major Applewhite's first game as the head coach of the South Alabama football program. But let's not forget about the huge bright spots that we saw, most specifically on offense, when it came to, 2 records broken by Gio Lopez in a game that they lost. I mean, there's got to be something to say about that.
The last time that South Alabama played at Hancock Whitney Stadium, he won the MVP of the 68 Ventures Bowl. He comes back in game 1 as the starter, replacing Carter Bradley. I think a lot of people had high hopes in him, but he throws for more than 400 yards, 432, runs for another 60-plus, 494 total. Single game records in his first start, essentially his first start. We'll talk as far as the season perspective goes.
It was his first start.
Nearly 500 yards, breaks single game records for total offense and passing offense. And, of course, if you have the passing record, that also means that your receivers are doing a great job as well. And Jackson High School star, former Jackson High School star, Jamal Pritchett, had a great game.
I love that for him, man.
Oh, yeah. He was huge.
He was so great at media days the Sun Belt, and just a wonderful personality. And, of course, this is the cousin of Nehemiah Pritchett, now in the NFL with the Seahawks. And man, I really enjoyed, our time with him and talking to him, and super humble, well-spoken. And I really, some of those guys that you just walk away and you go dang, I'm gonna cheer for him just because of the impact that he's had just in this conversation.
And I think you being an athlete and you understand the way the athletes are, you need those people in the locker room. Not only guys that are just purely talented, which he is, and he's I think their best receiver, but also guys that can be leaders in that locker room. And I think he's both. Yeah,
and does not give up on this South Alabama defense. At the end of the day, do they probably have similar scheme? You will never see me up here trying to explain whether it's the same scheme or not.
Right.
What and the different personnel. I didn't play football. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that I did. I have basic understanding, probably more than your average Joe. But I can talk about what it looks like in the locker room. All right, they bring back Will Wyndham, who is a Class A person. I mean, this guy is so fun to be around. Gerhard and I were in his office for the better part of way longer than we had that day, but we were still there just to be in his company. And he was so funny getting to know him. It was great. And I don't know, again, one of those people you just want to see do well. But when you have a defensive-minded head coach in Kane Womack, and then you have an offensive-minded head coach in Major Applewhite, there is a shift in what it looks like.
For sure.
And it's not like a priority changes type thing, but Major Applewhite's an offensive guru.
Right. And I think the culture changes a little bit in the way that you run your program. You talked about Coach Wyndham. I think that he wants to carry on a lot of that grit and physicality that this team had going into last year. And I think some of it was just what kind of bit them last year are a lot of big plays. They weren't necessarily carved up by this offense. I mean, shout out to North Texas. The Mean Green came out and did what they needed to do, especially in the second half. However,
it's a big part of college football. Is a big part of any football.
Right, exactly.
Is what you're doing in the second half.
Right, and explosive plays, I think, were really the key there. So I think if you're South, you go into this game with a lot of confidence. Hey, if we clean up these few things, we put ourselves in a much better position to win this football game. And the odds makers really believe that because South is a road favorite, 1 to 2, depending on which sports books you're looking at. So it lets you know that just because they gave up 52 last week, the odds makers think this team is much better than we might think or most people might think after week 1.
Yeah, for sure. And so I listen, and it's games like this, these first couple of weeks, first 3 weeks or so, where you do get to figure out what it is your identity. What is it that we need to fix? What do we need to be, harping on in the locker room so that when you do get into conference play, that's when it matters most, naturally. Right. And you have an opportunity. Everybody's playing for the same trophy this year, right? That's how it is nowadays, moving into the 12-team playoff format. That you have it kind of wheeling and dealing at that point. That you feel like you are just moving things along a little bit better on both sides of the ball because you've had a few games under your belt and they haven't cost you anything in the grand scheme of the picture of your schedule when it comes to the Sun Belt.
Yeah, it's not a make or break at all for any team that loses a game or two, as long as you can continue to put it together. Because as you mentioned, that the A5, the AQs, I should say, however they're doing the acronyms now as far as the teams that get in, you do have a chance. You do have an outside chance, and South will have a couple of opportunities. Yep. This opportunity in non-conference against Ohio. They'll have an opportunity against LSU a little bit later in the season, and a really tough and respected Sun Belt League as well, and that schedule starts here pretty soon.
I would argue one of the best in the G5, no question about that. All right. Meanwhile, Alabama will be back home in week 2 of the season in a game that a year ago, no lie, when they were preparing to play South Florida, and I realized that the game was in Tampa, I was scratching my head because not often do you see a team that at the time, P5, Alabama, no less, going on the road to play a group of 5 team. You just didn't do that. Like, you write the check, they come to you, they get beat by 40, and then their athletics program is paid for the next year. Like, that's how this goes in college football. Alabama goes there, and wow, that was not fun for the Tide fans, or Nick Saban, or Jalen Milroe, or anybody that was wearing crimson.
Yeah, and I think that game really kind of illuminated everybody that maybe Alabama has more work to do than they thought. Because if you remember that game, Jalen Milroe did not play that game. Then I know he didn't start that game, and if he played it very, very.
Yeah, they had the dude from the lacrosse boy from Notre Dame who went back and played lacrosse.
Tyler Buckner, who ended up winning a national championship in lacrosse. So,
and you know what? That's good for him because he needed to stick to that sport.
Yeah,
but he did just fine.
but to your point, it was a rainy day in Tampa.
The
offense couldn't move the football.
Bama fans.
I'm just saying that they went into that game.
You're talking.
Were
you on the coaching staff?
I'm not making excuses for them.
Oh, really?
I was just talking.
Sounds like a lot of excuses.
Just talking about what they saw.
Nonetheless.
But right after that is when they plugged in Jalen Milroe, and he took over from there. I don't think
and
anybody
they won like 19-3. 17-3.
17-3 was the final score.
Not great.
But after that, I think is when they thought, hey, we got something with Milroe.
It needed to happen. It needed to happen, but that was not fun for anybody that cheers for the Tide. And I'm not some like Bama fan. I'm from here. I mean, people are always calling us Bammers or Auburn fans or whatever. Listen, man, I'm from Ohio. Okay. I cheer for Notre Dame growing up. So I take that for what it's worth. But listen, the good news is for Alabama, South Florida is coming to Tuscaloosa this year. Yeah. And, Tuscaloosa last Saturday, that was a fun time.
That was a fun time.
That was fueled by this guy who we've talked about just a couple times in this show.
God, we talked about Gio Lopez, what he did last time he was at Hancock Whitney, and then what he did in his first game. Ryan Williams, the last time he was at Bryant-Denny Stadium, was in the 6A state championship game against Clay Chalkville. It's a game that came up just a little bit short, but in his first game back in Tuscaloosa, that performance was unbelievable. 2 catches, 2 touchdowns, led Alabama in receiving. They talked about him the entire offseason, just how much he's grinding. He's working. He's not doing what you would think a 5-star 17-year-old would do, which is kind of relax and lean on your own laurels.
Be scared to death?
And be scared. He came out with confidence.
In front of 100,000 in opening week in the first quarter.
And it's just you've run out of superlatives when you talk about just the way he's able to handle everything.
Literally the most full circle, check every single box as a human being, as a player, how he talks to the media, how he carries himself. It didn't shock anybody when Kalen DeBoer came down here for the Celebrity Senior Bowl golf outing. And I asked him about Ryan Williams. Right. And he was as straightforward as he could be. And the guy is always, very monotone. And it's not like he got up too high talking about him, but he's straight up said, Ryan Williams has a maturity about him that is unmatched. He said that he has already come in. He has already gained the respect of the locker room. Right. Hard to do when you're 17 and you should be going into your senior year of football. Right. And not to mention, make no mistake, if you've ever been in a locker room before, nobody likes the hot shot kid coming in,
for sure,
taking the PT, okay?
Naturally.
And the spotlight and the money and all the stuff that comes with it. But here's the thing, you can't hate on that dude. He is the nicest. Yeah. Like, he's just going to smile at you and he's just going to play ball. And that is what he is. Yeah. His parents done a fantastic job because he is just such a good dude. And to go in there, I'm not going to say I told you so, because I don't think anyone predicted 2 catches, 2 touchdowns for however many yards that was. But, wow. Right.
You knew it would be
Can't say I'm totally surprised.
Yeah, you can't say you're totally surprised that he had a successful run. I think even this shocked a lot of people, just the way he was able to do it and his final stat line, obviously. Jalen Milroe only threw 9 passes. 2 of them were to him for 2 touchdowns.
It felt like a lot more.
It did. But when you score 63 points, and he was such a he was this in high school, obviously. And as you mentioned it, just the maturity that he had. There's a couple times that we went out to Saraland, you and I, to go cover a football game, and he's just, talking to us like you and I just like we're buddies, like friends, and
just walked out. Hey, Simone. Hey, Gerhard. Like just in the middle of, and that was just who he was.
Right.
He wasn't too big for anybody. He's just never going to be that guy. I would be stunned. I would put money on him never being that guy. He's a humble kid. He's just the type of person that being from a sports anchor in the Mobile area, like I am almost like proud to be able to say like that we get to, at least say he came here.
Yeah.
He was here first, and then y'all got to take him over.
Right,
okay.
right.
We talked about him first. We've been there, done that. We've seen this.
It is really interesting because you talk to guys that are like leaders in that locker room, and Deontay Lawson, and I'll never forget this moment. It was a couple of weeks ago during fall camp. Yeah. The question was about the young guys, and they asked specifically about Ryan Williams. And even before the question was over, there was a smile ear to ear on Deontay Lawson's face, because he's like, hey, he's a Mobile County guy, and he's come in and he's done what he's needed to do. And I think when you see things like that from your leadership group, especially from the other side of the football, he understands that Ryan Williams is ready for this moment, and he proved it in game one.
Yeah, he definitely did. And then he met with the media. And if you saw what the media hoopla looked like at Bryant Denny after this game, I mean, he was surrounded with media members. And, well, I can tell you the last time that we saw a freshman surrounded by media members in Alabama had been, 20 years ago, at least after a regular season game, because Nick Saban didn't let freshmen talk to the media. So the only time we ever got to talk to like the Tua Tagovailoas of the type where we know when they were freshmen was going into a bowl game, because everybody had to be made available. They just threw us all out there, the media and football team, and said, all right, y'all figure it out. And they couldn't just like go shield them, like Coach Saban did with freshmen. And we always wanted to talk to these guys and we couldn't. So we actually got to have Ryan's perspective. And I will say, I feel like a little bit of youthfulness came out in him with this interview, so to speak. And I just kind of enjoyed that. Let's take a listen.
Just seeing, those 100,000, just supporting us with everything they had, all the air in their lungs, it was really just exciting for me. All I can say is, like, my guys, the O-line held up all night. Like, they did their part. Everybody just did their job. And, it just so happened that I ended up having the game that I did. But a lot of guys, definitely did their part.
This guy immediately giving credit to the people around him. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but I just love that. He's totally handled himself in a total class way.
Right.
You could tell that I think he was a little bit, I don't know, I want to say nervous, because, he's out there playing in front of 100,000, and then you get in front of the cameras. It's just a different type of viewership, But there was a youthfulness and just a, like he was excited. He was, and that's okay. He was excited, and then he gave credit to everybody around him, and you could not ask for a better person to represent your program.
Yeah, and he does this thing where he balances really well. I'm happy to be here, and I belong. And so he belongs where he is.
And so true. So true.
He belongs where he is, but he still has that very youthful, as you said, I'm happy to be here, happy to be a part of this program. And I think everybody to a T has talked about how he's done that in the locker room as well. This is not some put on Saturday after a big game. This has been who he's been since he walked on campus.
Yeah, and Quentin Russell says that quote that Ryan had in the game, the 4 + 2 = 6. It was like, okay, I'm going to say this, and hopefully it just hits well. And we don't have that one queued up, but it was pretty great. And you could tell it came from a place of just genuine excitement that he's rolled in and had such a great chemistry with the starting quarterback and the captain of the football team, of course, and Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, and Milroe talked about him during SEC Media Days in Dallas, and you and I heard him just how he talks about how a lot of these young receivers, and you talk about a guy like Kendrick Law, who had a really good game as well, and some of these younger guys have really taken to this offense and what Kalen DeBoer wants to do. And we know Coach DeBoer is really great at developing wide receivers. We've seen that at Washington and here, but you knew there was something special going on there between Milroe and Williams. Then you saw that 4 + 2. You saw a pair of sixes.
Yep, no doubt, absolutely. All right, guys, we're going to head over to the Plains now, where Auburn will play their second of 5 straight home games to open the season. You couldn't ask for anything better from that if you're Hugh Freeze. You also couldn't ask for anything better than what you saw out of your wide receiver room. Speaking of local talented dudes getting it done at a high level, it's happening over on the Plains as well.
They were called the Freeze Four when they were first signed on to Auburn. It's Cam Coleman, who's out of Central Phoenix City. Of course, Perry Thompson, who's out of Foley High School. Bryce Kane, and also another local native out of Baker High School, as well as Malcolm Simmons. These 4 players made an immediate impact. I know Jarquez Hunter scored the first touchdown for Auburn. But then after that, you saw Cam Coleman go off. You saw Malcolm Simmons go off. You saw Keon Scott also go off as well here for the Auburn Tigers. So this is an Auburn offense that I know, hey, it's Alabama A&M, but there has to be a level of what we've worked on, what we think we can be. We put that on film in game one. And I think if you're an Auburn fan, you got to be really happy about what this team is brewing, what this team can do. And if you're Auburn in the locker room, you're saying, hey, this wasn't just hype. These guys came together really well.
Yeah, and then we keep things in perspective, of course, in it being Alabama A&M.
For
but
sure.
listen, man, when it's football at any level, you just want to see them go. You just want to see guys go out there and execute the way that you had seen in practice leading up to it for weeks. And so just to see that, I think for Hugh Freeze, it's like, okay, like this looks like I want it to look. This is playing out the way I want it to play out. These freshmen, I think he told us like he's like they're just excited to play football, and there's a level of that is enjoyable for coaches. Just not the looking into the money and all the things, and just guys who are playing for the love of the game. And I think that he feels like he has that in his unit there in the wide receiver room, but. On the other side of that is let's give credit to where it's due on the offensive line as well, because although it was a team that was probably outmatched when it comes to obviously talent and recruiting and all the things, and nothing against Alabama A&M, but the offensive line, which was getting shuffled, they were shuffling the deck 10 seconds before the season, it felt like, going in, late into fall camp.
Right.
And I feel like the execution there looked the way it needed to look, and Peyton Thorne, to his credit, probably maybe only had 2 throws you wish he would have had back.
Yeah, I think he executed a really – it was kind of a vanilla game plan, I would say, but it was a game plan that they knew, hey, we have a chance to give our playmakers the football and have Peyton Thorne go in there and make some good throws. And as you mentioned, there's not a lot that he would take back from that football game. And I think that you talk to everybody to a man, they would say, hey, there's some things that we could tweak. There's some things that we could do better. But I think for game number 1, Peyton Thorne not looking over his shoulder now because, Robbie Ashford last year was there, and they had the best of intentions last year.
There's a level of confidence that comes with not having to look over your shoulder and wonder who's there, and if I make a mistake, and am I going to get pulled, and what does that look like? And so, no question that there's a confidence there for sure. We heard from Hugh Freeze on Monday for his normal press conference. Let's take a listen from Coach earlier this week.
Good, really. There were a few routes that were a little short, but outside of that, it wasn't really any MAs, no wrong routes so it was pretty basic game plan. This week will be more extensive, so we've got to get some good work in today, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all the way up. But thought they handled their first real live go in front of a lot of people. I thought they handled it really well.
So Coach Freeze very excited, like I mentioned, about the playmaking ability of the receivers and also of what Peyton Thorne was able to do in terms of execution and going out there and just being more confident and more comfortable. There were times last year where I think people were wondering, can he be the guy? Right. And I think there was a lot of talk about the Big Ten not being the SEC, of course, previous Michigan State quarterback, and he did incredible things there. I think he threw for over 2,000 yards, the season before he transferred to Auburn. And so people wanted to come and see the similar output, of course. But when you're learning a new system, and, Hugh Freeze wasn't calling plays. Now the guy has a total grasp of this offense. He has offensive like-minded people. He knew he needed to make those changes. Make no mistake. The guy's been coaching football for a long time. He got his people into that staff room, and we're seeing that play out on the field right now. Yeah,
I think that there is something to be said for Coach knowing, hey, what we're doing right now is not working. Let's change things up. Derek Nix, you mentioned it, new offensive coordinator, DJ Durkin, the new defensive coordinator. But we'll stick with offense because that's where he goes. It's like, this is just, I think it's a phenomenal staff here. What we've seen so far with Derek Nix, and he had high expectations. He said he wants this team to score 40 points per game. Well, by the averages, by the numbers, they're put themselves in pretty good shape.
I'm not sure. In the 10 years that I've covered Auburn, I don't know, maybe it was 2013 that they scored that.
I think the Cam year, I think they were close.
Okay, that was before I was here.
Right.
So I'm talking about Gus Malzahn and beyond.
Yeah, I don't think that.
The answer is no.
Probably the as you said, the 13 season, but those numbers probably skewed because they had a lot of close games that year.
Yeah, and then again, the game has changed, obviously, but Auburn didn't change with the game.
Right. They didn't.
Much to the unhappiness of the Auburn Tiger fans. Okay, it was not great. Right. And think back to several non-conference games that shouldn't have been as close or ended up in a loss for Auburn. It was not fun. And so I think a lot of people didn't know what to expect in the Hugh Freeze hire when Auburn made that move, and all the drama that is with Auburn behind the scenes and the political stuff and who's actually calling the shots. And that's, I mean, Yellowwood, somebody else. I mean, there's always something going on over there. But listen, let's take a deep breath. 5 home games start the year. Couldn't ask for anything better. Then you got to get things going with Arkansas and Oklahoma to start the season in the SEC.
I think the schedule plays out really well for what Auburn is trying to do. They're trying to build some momentum. Of course, last year you end off your season with 3 heartbreaking losses. That New Mexico State game, I think, really changed everything for what Coach Hugh Freeze wanted to do. I think that he probably knew it after that game. Hey, things will probably change.
He probably knew before then.
And then you play your heart out in the Iron Bowl, and on 4th and 31, that happens. And then you go out in the bowl game, and you lose that bowl game as well.
It's crazy because being somebody who's not a fan of SEC football from the standpoint of, like, I didn't grow up into this.
Right.
I've become a fan of it since covering it. I'm on to the next year.
Yeah.
So you bring up 4th and 31. I'm like, that was 10 years ago. It's like 10 months
like,
ago. Like that was like yesterday. And for fans in the Iron Bowl, it's every day.
It's every day.
And I've adopted that as a sports anchor. But you know, in the life of being a mom to a toddler, and then also in the ever-changing landscape of college football and sports in general, you're always kind of on to the next one. So like for you to bring up like New Mexico State, like gosh, that's like in the total rear view. Yeah. And hopefully for fans at Auburn and for Hugh Freeze and the guys that were on that field, hopefully it's in the rear view for them too.
I think so. And to me, the only reason I brought those games up because I think it was so important for Auburn to get off to a great start this year.
I'm just being a bad sports journalist by not thinking about how that ended last year. I think I just put it in the background because I cheer for Alabama and Auburn. I want both teams to do well in the Iron Bowl. I mean, you never know what's going to happen in that game. I want someone to do well and hopefully go so we can cover a national championship. But, But make no mistake, like it's not going to have any betting or a rooting interest for sure. But man, I didn't think back to how. I mean, I knew it ended rough, but man, that was not a fun stretch there.
And it was whether it's blowout games or close games. I think that's why this year needed to start out so well, and it informed the reason why Auburn made wholesale changes in the offseason. Yeah. And so far, the early returns have been pretty good. Now, can they carry that on this week? And as you mentioned, the next 3 games at home that are after this one. So it's the schedule sets up for you to build momentum going into the year. Can they sustain that? We'll find out a little bit more on Saturday.
We never actually said that Auburn hosts Cal, by the way.
Yeah, Auburn does host Cal.
If I did, I don't think I actually ever said that. And there's actually a lot of interesting storylines just within these two teams as well. And we don't need to get into the total nitty-gritty of that. But a year ago, I mean, Auburn was on the door of taking an L in this game over on the West Coast. And part of that is just the travel. Now the Bears will have to deal with the same situation, and it being a relatively early kickoff at 2:30. There's still an adjustment with the time change when you're coming from 3 hours away over there on the West Coast. And so, not to mention, their former quarterback is catching balls on Jordan Hare right now, and what an unbelievable touchdown catch, by the way, last week.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was huge. And this is a Cal team that obviously has a new offensive coordinator as well. Keep in mind, last year it was DJ James, a former Spanish defensive back, that ended that game with a game-sealing interception, 14-10. I expect a lot more points on Saturday. But Auburn was able to get out of there with a win last year. We'll see if they'll be able to do the same on Saturday.
That seems like 10 years ago. I have the 24-hour rule, guys, okay? I adopt like the Nick Saban, I'm moving on to the next one mentality. So
we're on to Cincinnati.
Or I'm losing it. Okay, let's talk quickly about Notre Dame and some other college football teams that we kind of keep a close eye on. Notre Dame naturally because of Riley Leonard, who is a Fairhope native, former Fairhope football star, and just a really all-star on and off the field. We had a story on him yesterday. We spoke with his mom and have a kind of a funny back and forth that they have, and love that relationship as a boy mom myself. Hopefully, my son will be leading Notre Dame to win someday too. But he didn't have like the most, I think, the greatest game. And he even said that. He says, I think in post-game press conference, of course, they beat Texas A&M, and I think that he was very, it's just himself. It's just who he is in the post-game press conference when he said, I'm the one that's up here doing the interview, but a lot of people poured into this game beyond something, what I did.
Right. But we knew that going in, this would be a tough game, but Riley Leonard didn't have the eye-popping stats, but he did have 2 great plays on the last drive. They were in 4th down to be able to set up that game-winning touchdown. That game-winning touchdown was obviously a rushing touchdown. Their running backs did a really good job as well. So pulled up the stats here. He had 158 yards, 63 on the ground. So, I mean, it's not a typical Riley Leonard game that we're used to seeing because we're used to seeing him light it up. But he did exactly what he needed to do. He's a captain of this team. Keep in mind, he spent the last 3 years over at Duke.
Yeah.
And he comes onto this team and immediately becomes a captain. That's how much they like him.
And immediately plays
against
against Texas A&M.
In College Station.
In College Station against
Right.
100, the biggest SEC stadium, in the league. So
and against his former coach as well. We knocked on the
I loved that.
storyline
I love
last
that,
week
yeah.
where Coach Mike Elko, who coached him at Duke, a defensive guy.
he said he didn't even want to play
He
against
knows
him.
it,
It was
right.
that was really kind of cute,
Right.
for lack of a better phrase.
If he was going as anybody that knew him better, it would be probably Coach Tim Carter and Coach Mike Elko. Those are the two guys.
Yep, no question about that. Around the rest of college football, I know that there's some significant games in terms of what it could look like for the national headlines, but also locally, we're keeping an eye on several teams that will be on the road and some looking for their first win.
Yeah, we mentioned with South Alabama staying in the Sun Belt, Troy. Jared Parker, the new head coach at Troy, came up a little bit short. Very good dude. Lost by 2 in their opener against Nevada. Troy is at Memphis. Memphis is 1-0. And then Southern Miss will host Southeastern Louisiana as well. That game, also another game that's in the Sun Belt as well. And you mentioned the kind of the big games of mirror across the country. Texas, number 3, goes to Michigan, goes to the big house there to face off against them. So that'll be really interesting in Texas' second game as a member of the SEC. Tennessee,
still weird.
24, I know, right? Tennessee, the number 14 team in the country, will face NC State. That game will not be at NC State. It'll actually be in Charlotte. It's the Dukes Mayo Classic in Charlotte.
That's always a disgusting ending to that game.
Terrible.
Literally awful.
Was
it Shane Beamer that was doing the most with that? Was that 2 years ago?
It was 2. Yeah, it was.
This is like my sense of time. It happens when you have a kid.
Eating mayonnaise. It's disgusting.
Listen, mayonnaise, not my child, he's saying.
No. Your child is amazing. Mayonnaise is disgusting.
Guys, what else? What else do you have on the sheet before we say bye?
Yeah, so
we're going to be on the air at 9, supposedly.
Yeah, we do. Ole Miss is at home. Mississippi State's on the road. Ole Miss will host Middle Tennessee. Mississippi State on the road at Arizona. Georgia at home against Tennessee Tech. South Carolina, Kentucky is another big game in the SEC. And Missouri, sneaky, a top 10 team, the number 9 team in the country. They'll host Buffalo in a big game there. So
a couple of conference games, and for our teams, we're still a week or two away from really seeing the nitty-gritty of the SEC schedule or the Sun Belt really kick off. But nonetheless, college football in full swing. The NFL will begin tomorrow. What is today? Wednesday? So tomorrow?
Tomorrow. Rematch of the AFC Championship game between the Ravens and the Chiefs.
I love that. A lot of local ties to those games as well, and what they've had, the success they've had very recently. So we'll be covering that. Of course, Gerhard will keep it locked down on the weekend for all of our NFL coverage as the Saints also gear up to begin this season. But it's been an exciting year so far, guys. We're only a week into college football, a couple weeks into high school football, but we're bound to have some really, really fun shows here on Wednesdays because football always brings some really good topics, as we know.
A lot to digest. Every week, it just gets more and more each time.
It's consuming.
Exactly.
It's exhausting. All right, guys, listen, we appreciate you tuning in, and I would be remiss if I did not mention our guy behind the scenes, Pat O'Donnell. He's on vacation for a couple days, and, I pretty much looked at him today and was like, dude, get back here.
We need you.
Not exactly what I said, but something like that. I was like, please come back and work at the station. Don't go on vacation in the middle of football season ever. And anyways, he's back, so we appreciate him. Producer Pat behind the scenes, as always. And it's been joyful to have him back today. And he'll be with us for Fifth Quarter Extra, too, on Friday. So do not forget, of course, we will have Fifth Quarter that kicks off at 10 o'clock here on WKRG News 5. We have a huge slate of games, 15 that we're going to have cruise out at, pregame coverage leading up, beginning at 5 o'clock as well. So tune into that, and just super excited for week 3 of the high school football season. We will join you back on this platform for Fifth Quarter Extra as we recap week 3 of the season as everybody is in region play.
It's certainly a fun time of year, and I think a lot more storylines will start to develop after we see the way these results play out, not only Friday, but Saturday, and then, of course, the NFL Sunday.
Yeah, and our arguments will develop because we start to have a difference of opinion as the season goes on.
They're just heating up.
Always. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. For Gerhard, for Pat, everybody here at WKRG News 5. I'm Simone Eli, and we will see you on Friday.